In this special reInvent edition of All in the Field, we are streaming to you from AWS On Air.
And today we're going to be talking to some colleagues from McDonald's, the Foundation for Agriculture Research, and AudioT about how public-private partnerships are driving innovation in broiler, which are chickens, production.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of energy this week. We're really looking forward to hearing from you. We have our special moderator, who is always with us for All in the Field, Nathan Pugh, and our new guest moderator, Ronnie Eichler. And they'll be watching for your tweets throughout the episode.
Awesome. There's a lot of insights that are going to be shared today, especially on this episode. So really excited to be on AWS On Air edition of All in the Field.
AWS Agriculture Live. Hi, I'm Dr. Karen Hildebrand. I am our worldwide head of solutions architecture for the agriculture industry at AWS. I'm a fourth generation farmer myself and have spent my off the farm career building and developing cloud adoption with AI ML across a variety of companies in the Fortune 500. And it's really a privilege to work within the agriculture industry and to work with the great worldwide customers that we have at AWS.
Yeah, and I'm Matt Wolf. I'm a solutions architect with AWS out of Chicago, and I've been working with agriculture companies in the Midwest for about the last 3 years.
And we have some amazing guests today. But first, let's take a stopover in our field notes. So, Matt, this week we've had a lot of announcements with reInvent and really exciting capabilities that are going to help to accelerate our customers to develop what they're building in their machine learning pipelines. I'm really excited about some of the announcements. And we're getting to hear from our guests today about what they were able to do in 6 months, even given the constraints that have been kind of placed on everybody this year.
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, when we talk about speed of innovation and a global scale, these customers represent exactly that. You know, understanding how to capture data in a new way, understanding what it means from an animal health perspective, and then to scale it globally to an operation the size of McDonald's. It's just amazing.
It really is. It's phenomenal. I can't wait to bring our guests on. Just a quick reminder for everybody that is watching on reInvent, please tweet your comments, your questions, use hashtag AWS on air, and you will be able to hear responses, obviously, in real time from Nathan and Ronnie. And then if you have questions, they'll bring them forward to our special guests today, Banks, Tim, and Tom, or for the two of us. So let's jump right in.
Awesome. All right, so we're happy to bring in our first two guests. We've got Banks Baker, who's the manager of animal welfare and sustainability at McDonald's, and Dr. Tim Kurt, scientific program director for advanced animal systems at the Foundation for Agricultural Research, which is FFAR.
Great. Welcome to both of you. And Banks, let's start with you. Let's have you introduce yourself. Thanks for coming on air and looking forward to our discussions today.
To be here. I'm Banks Baker. I'm on McDonald's U.S. sustainability team, and I focus on our protein sustainability. So those are things like our animal health and welfare commitments, our antibiotics policies, and now most recently implementing greenhouse gas reduction strategies in our protein supply chain. I've also been given the opportunity to lead several of our ag tech development and engagement projects, and you'll get to hear a little bit more about that today. Previous to McDonald's, I actually worked on farms and ranches across the United States and established a research foundation farm in Cincinnati, Ohio before joining. Thanks for having me.
All right. And Dr. Kurt, can you tell us a little bit about who you are? And we'll dive into what FFAR is in just a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Matt and Karen. I'm Tim Kurt. I'm a scientific program director at FFAR, which I'll tell you about in just a minute. My background is actually in veterinary medicine and research. I did both PhD training and am trained as a veterinarian. And I've been with the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research for about 4 years, where I oversee all of our programs related to animal health and welfare.
you both have phenomenal backgrounds and really extensive work within agriculture. And we're really excited to have yourselves on and Tom Darbonne, who we'll bring on later on in the episode. But let's dive a little bit into your expertise together and what the Smart Broiler project is. Obviously, a $2 million investment in phase one is no small investment. And so we really want to look at under the covers of what brought you guys together.
All right, let's get started. So, Banks, what would you say the Smart Boiler project is, and why did McDonald's happen to invest in it?
Well, the Smart Broiler program is a $4.6 million global collaborative competitive animal ag tech research and development project, specifically focused on measuring welfare for chickens at the farm and production level. And we're really lucky for the program to have great partners like FFAR, and you'll get to hear more from Tim. But then we also have great sponsors like the U.S. Poultry and Egg Association, also Amazon Web Services, of course, and Accenture. They've helped out the program quite a bit. A little bit of background for why McDonald's was interested in developing this type of technology. We were one of the first companies, global restaurant companies, to come out and set an outcomes-based animal welfare policy. So essentially what that means is as opposed to being overly prescriptive on inputs or production parameters for the birds that end up in our global supply chain, we actually made the decision that we were going to start monitoring animal welfare outcomes at the bird level. So literally actually looking at the birds and observing specific attributes. What we call that is key welfare indicators, kind of similar to a KPI in business. And what that is an overall indicator of the type of welfare environment that a bird's been in throughout its life. So we've developed several of those that we're finalizing now, and we're going to be collecting those across our global supply chain and then aggregating those outcomes into a database format and then allowing that to inform where opportunities exist and then working with our suppliers and their farmers to identify those opportunities and then set improvement goals to be able to do that. We understood that gathering that amount of information at a global scale and in order to be standardized and representative, we knew that technology was going to need to play a pretty significant role. So McDonald's dedicated $2 million, and then we were lucky enough to locate FFAR, who had some similar initiatives that they were looking at, and we combined our resources, and we released a global RFP, and that was open across the world to anybody that was interested, and that's how we identified our Smart Broiler researchers.
And that's really cool. I think that partnership is pretty fantastic. And Dr. Kurt, would you mind, for those of that are watching that maybe aren't familiar as much with agriculture, could you help just describe what FFAR is and the types of research it does? I know there's a really broad spectrum, but I'll try and limit you to like 30 seconds or less. What is FFAR, and could you help us kind of understand and scope that?
I'll do my best. So FFAR, as we call it, is an interesting nonprofit research funding organization. We work across the agriculture sciences to support innovative research. And we do so through a partnership model, a matching fund model, where we work with very closely with the private sector. So companies like AWS and McDonald's, as well as others, to support these initiatives to address major challenges. And so while we work in other spaces like the soil health space or urban food systems, our area of focus here being animal health and welfare. So that's the way we work, and we put out these calls as Banks described, and we are able to fund researchers that have really interesting projects that may be really commercially relevant.
Okay, so kind of technology brought the two of you together for this project. And when you guys kind of got started, what did you think really success would look like? What were some like your wildest dreams and hopes for the project?
I think foremost, you heard that some of the reasons why we were able to invest that type of money was to allow us to better understand animal welfare for broiler chickens at the farm production level. And then that being able to do that would allow us to achieve our outcomes-based goals. So, at the crux of this, that's the basic expectation. But of course, there's more to that than just doing that. as agriculture becomes more and more digitized and we're seeing agriculture move to more of a data insight type model, it's exciting for McDonald's to be a part of programs like this that are developing new technologies that haven't been implemented at a commercial setting, and for us to be a part of it. We've got a decades-long commitment to leadership in animal health and welfare, and I think the Smart Broiler programs and really is a great demonstration of us continuing that legacy and being able to be a part of what I believe the future of animal welfare is going to be. The other thing that's interesting that I do want to highlight is that neither McDonald's or FFAR are going to be retaining any IP from this project. So it's really an interesting thing where we're doing this for the betterment of the broiler industry as a whole. And I think, you know, the more that we can understand, the more that we can improve. And that's why we're here at the table.
Great.
Yeah, and I think, you know, from that question, like, Banks, the way that you set up this initiative, it's really in two phases, correct? So in phase one, you've had 6 teams involved. What were some of the lessons that you've learned so far out of phase one?
Yeah, well, we've learned a lot in phase one, and phase one's certainly not over. So we're continuing that learning journey. But I think as far as you know, not being involved in the specific research itself, something that's been really exciting for me to see is this relationship between the world's leading academic researchers and now the world's leading technology companies. Having Amazon Web Services and Accenture come onto this program and be able to provide resources to academic researchers that maybe haven't been as used to delivering a commercial solution, more of an academic one, has been really exciting to see. And we've seen progress accelerated at a faster rate than even we expected. To the point where Tim and I have actually talked about applying this type of structure and this type of research to other projects that we're looking at down the line.
That's really cool. So Tim, then I'm going to ask you the same question, but I'm going to pivot it a little bit. In phase one, so far, what has been the most surprising, you know, animal health insight that you've seen from the 6 teams, or that you've been able to learn as this process goes along?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one of the most interesting insights I've had may seem kind of basic to people, but it's the reality that welfare does not exist in a silo, but rather when you improve animals' health and welfare, you're improving production efficiency generally for farmers. And so for that means profitability, and that means economic viability for farmers and producers. So I truly believe animal welfare is important on its own, that we need to always be mindful of the animals that are in our care. But there's more to it, and I think there's a business case to be made for animal welfare, and so that's something that I think I've realized more through the course of the program, and which I think is one way that hopefully producers and others will take a look at these types of technologies and say, hey, this could actually really benefit me and my operation.
Wow, yeah, that's really great to hear. All right, so at this point, we're going to thank Banks and Dr. Kurt. We'll be bringing you back on the show a little bit later here. And let's go ahead and bring on Tom Darbonne from AudioT. Tom, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself and just kind of describe your intersection with Banks and Tim.
Sure. Okay, so there are 6 teams in the Smart Broiler program. 5 of them are video analytics. 1 is audio analytics, that's us. So we're the only audio analytic player here. And we actually think that video and audio are going to end up being very complementary. They suit each other very well. They can nail different tasks. So as a company, we're brand new, but the technology trajectory that we've followed is really about 12 years old. And it grows out of a researcher named Wayne Daly, who is at Georgia Tech Research Institute's Agricultural Technology Research Program. And he had an insight that, you know, in the old days, they used to just listen to the birds. The farmer would go in and you could try to determine what was going on with flock health with your ears. And that has been lost today. And the other thing has happened is the birds are bigger, the houses are bigger, everything's scaling up, so that's no longer even viable. Why not teach machines to do the same thing? And so he introduced Dr. David Anderson of the Georgia Tech School of Electrical Computer Engineering, who's an expert in acoustics, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. And the initial challenge was, can we find out if they're coughing? Yeah, we can do that. Okay, can you figure out what kind of cough it is? To some degree, yes. And then we began to realize that there were a lot of other things that we could get out of animal welfare that related to stress levels, environmental impact on the animals, machines breaking down in the background that would then have an environmental impact. So audio just became a very, very useful tool. We were very lucky to have Dr. Brandon Carroll join us for algorithm development. He actually completed his PhD thesis, and then we were chosen to join the Smart Broiler program, which has just been an exceptional opportunity for us. It's not only brought us into contact with Tyson and McDonald's and FFAR, but also AWS and Accenture as partners, and we've really learned a lot from everybody.
And I think that's the great part of this project, is it's really been a great learning opportunity and collaboration. And we know that the step one for you is really, how do you actually capture the audio, and how, what's the density that you're going to need in order to be accurate at that? So could you maybe just tell us a little bit about how you approached that, what your thoughts were there?
Yeah, this is actually for a technology company trying to transition university technology out into an industrial setting. This is a major benefit, because we have industrial size houses now to work with that are highly relevant to training new models. And then we have the links all the way through with the support of AWS and Accenture. So I don't know if there's a graphic we can pull up that might show one of the houses. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So this is one of the Tyson. Tyson has 4 similarly sized houses on their broiler welfare research farm. These are industrially sized scale, which means 400 to 600 feet long, 40 to 60 feet wide. Chickens are not grown in cages. They're grown in these very, very large structures, and they're able to run around. So we were able to instrument this house, and I think I've kind of highlighted some microphones that we've placed along, in this case, a water line and a controller to kind of bring those together. The data that we used for this first exercise was really around February data that we collected from one of the houses. And so that's it. I mean, this data doesn't exist. There are no data sets that you can pull off the web. You have to go get it yourself.
Oh, that's cool. So you've kind of shown us now how you start capturing the auditory data, and then kind of the next step in the process, you've got to figure out how to label it in order to make it predictive. Can you walk us through how you kind of do that?
The labeling effort was basically, over the years, we've developed our own tools to do a lot of the pre-labeling. And then we taught all the students how to do labeling, which was actually a good part of their practicum exercise. And then we used techniques where 3 students would look at the same data, and there was sort of a voting mechanism. If 2 of them agreed it was the same signal, that was in. And, if it was only 1, it wasn't.
That's
cool.
Great. That's a great way of making sure that they're accurate. That's fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. And give them a grade, maybe even, right? So now we've got the data and we've got it labeled. Can you talk to us a little bit about what machine learning algorithms the team's tried?
Yeah, so we had to go through this process of taking the data and getting it into the AWS platform. So what's an S3 bucket? Well, that's where you start finding this stuff out. And so we started working with the AWS platform, and came up a relatively steep learning curve very, very quickly. A shout out to Brian Klimzak and Eric Tobin from AWS, who really helped the students learn very quickly how to get into the SageMaker and set us up with some of the SageMaker Studio. This is actually some of the built-in algorithms that were available. And all the students had backgrounds in machine learning. They had no experience with the AWS platform. And they, at this point, they had 2 weeks to actually get models working and running, and they needed to do that independently. So I'm just highlighting here the things that are circled are the various things that the 11 students used. And then there were comparisons in terms of what works best. It wasn't important to us that they had the best model. It was important to us that they had gotten out and tried to learn and tried to use these things.
That's awesome. So would it be fair to say then, kind of looking at the AWS portfolio of services, technology, that was a big part of kind of the learning curve when you kick things off, in addition to kind of bridging the knowledge with just audio capture?
Yeah, and there's a piece of that. We realized we needed to have an AWS administrator to offload everybody, and that helped. And then Eric was great too. So we felt like we had support.
Cool. So can you maybe then tell us a little bit about the background of the students who actually worked on the research? Kind of who were they? What was their contribution to the project overall?
Okay. Yeah, so let me tell you a little bit about the students. They were basically spread all over the world. And the other thing that was interesting is they had no connection with each other. They've been in this analytics program for 2 years. If they were online learners, they had never really worked with each other. So we had this this effort of trying to bring everybody together to work together, and that's basically we got some help from Accenture to figure out good mechanisms to do that. Cindy Weflin was a tremendous help to us there, and so we double, weekly meetings and et cetera. I can actually show you some of the results if that's of interest to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a peek.
Okay. So one of the things we wanted to do, and I'll rush through this kind of quickly in the interest of time, but we needed to give them a problem that they could understand, and that the things that they needed to label were relatively easy. And we focused on sleep quality for the introduction of chicks into one of these big buildings. So just think about small little tiny yellow ball, massive building. It's a little bit disconcerting. And so they have to learn how to get to their food and to the water, and that is a big predictor of flock performance. So we wanted to look at their nighttime routines to see how well they were settling in. So first, they developed models, and they've got results that kind of looked like this, that were more predicted, check the accuracy. Let's go to the next slide. Mm-hmm. Then they were able to actually get a run on all of the model data and find out how the chirp counts were happening. So we could see the levels of activity where the lights turned off and when it got dark. And then finally, the last slide, this is the one I really like. It's a heat map. You can get the next slide there. This tells us just at a glance, you can see that there's big diffuse activity in the early days, and then by the end of day 4, it's really clustered in. So they've dropped into a good rhythm. So this would be an indication of a healthy flock performance in the early days, and that will have a lot to do with the productivity of the entire flock over all the time. So the students were from the Masters in Analytics program. There's 3 that I probably want to do a call out to. Kelly, John, and Hai Lim were all exceptional contributors, and actually were able to develop all this. The Masters of Science program was unique at Georgia Tech because it has this practicum component, so that they were able to kind of get this work done and get some real world experience.
I think that's fantastic. And it's great to kind of connect the dots between what the students were able to have to label. So I know we asked you to bring along some auditory samples for us so we could hear what they had to listen to and be able to label, and how they translated that all the way through to a machine learning pipeline using Amazon SageMaker. So could we play some of those audio samples, and then afterwards, could you just tell us what we're hearing?
Sure. Okay, so now you're hearing bird sounds and a lot of chirping here. So this would be probably daytime activity chirping. The sound that you heard before was probably a feed auger that was running. And that's actually one of the problems in doing the audio analytics is these are not quiet environments. What you don't hear there is if it's hot, there's a lot of fans running, and these houses are not quiet. So we have to tease out all of the elements, and this is where the machine learning and the analytics is very important.
Wow, that's really phenomenal. I think we're going to take this opportunity as well to bring back Banks and Tim on camera. So Tom, you guys can tell kind of when the birds are in a deep sleep state. What is the action that can change from an animal health perspective based on that data, though?
I can say that the thing that you want to see there is that they are settling in. If that didn't take 4 days, if it took them longer to get to feed and water, it's really going to impact the entire flock performance. And you're going to have birds that either have to stay in the house longer or they're going to come in underweight.
Okay.
Interesting. And in the interest of time, I'm going to wrap us up here a little bit, but Tim, it would be great to understand, you've obviously developed a roadmap for private and public partnership, bringing together kind of veterinary research, funding partners from the private sector, startup organizations and research institutions, being able to knit that together into an outcome. What's next really for the Smart Broiler Initiative?
Yeah, thanks, Karen. It's a really exciting program just because of all the partnerships that you've mentioned across various sectors, including entrepreneurs like Tom and big food companies like McDonald's and Tyson. And what's really unique about this program is that some of these projects are actually being tested and validated in these commercial environments that Tom just showed us. And so we, as Banks described, started the program with $4 million. And we've had some additional funds provided by the U.S. Poultry and Egg Association, and then additional contributions from AWS and Accenture. And we actually awarded $2 million among these first 6 teams, and that was part of our first phase. And so they have about 18 months to do some of their development and early research, and then we'll actually reinvest in a subset of those teams. They may combine and work together. We have that $2 million remaining from the original portion to invest in these projects for another 18-month period starting in late 2021. So we're really looking forward to the second phase of this program.
I'm really looking forward to it too. I'm curious now from the others' perspectives, what are you looking forward to? Can I say, Tom, I'm going to kick to you next and then Banks afterwards. What are you most excited about in the Smart Broiler Initiative and what's coming next?
There's a couple things. The one is we've started to have dialogues, at least, with some of the video analytics teams. That's really cool because we're beginning to find out ways that we can kind of coordinate the efforts. And then the other thing that I'm looking forward to is how does this get implemented on farm?
Yeah.
Farmers don't have a lot of funds for a lot of exotic equipment, and they generally don't have the internet connectivity. So this is a ripe application for edge processing. And, I'm excited to actually bring these kind of techniques onto the edge and see what kind of impact that might really have.
I think you just talked to every tech person's dream there. We all want to know how we can bring more into the edge and how we can help make that affordable for farmers to be able to implement these kind of new technologies. So I didn't even have to prompt you for that. That was perfect. Thanks. Now I'm going to kick it to you. What are you most excited about? What's next for the Smart Broiler Initiative?
Yeah, well, I'm really excited to see the wrap up of phase 1 and to see the end results of that. And those researchers that demonstrated the most promise and value, they're going to get refunded again for phase 2. And then we're going to be asking potentially some of them to collaborate and work together to actually deliver us an implementable solution that allows us to better monitor and improve animal welfare globally. So that, I always try to pinch myself and remember that this is all about improving the lives of birds around the world. And this is just the beginning of it. So I think even in a bigger picture, it's exciting to look down maybe in 10 years for what this type of technology has laid the framework for what the future of ag tech is going to be.
That is so cool. All right, so it's live. It's our time to actually check in with our viewers with our All the Chat segment. Matt, do we have some burning questions for Banks, Tim, or Tom from the tweet stream?
Not a ton of questions here. Let me pick one up. One of the questions that came in, and I think we'll ask Tom for this one. Tom, you kind of mentioned sort of passive sound used in machine learning to monitor the animals. Have you guys thought about anything like a projected sound where you're doing something more like echolocation to understand where the birds are at or their movement, for example?
Well, yeah. So when we think of sensing and sound and the types of techniques we developed, on the low end, something that's a really low frequency microphone is called an accelerometer. Okay. And on the high end, it's basically ultrasound. And you can just see that there's more of these sensors are, they've been around for a long time. They're in mobile phones. Thank you very much. They're cheap. So we have an opportunity to do a lot of stuff with that. The challenge we have with poultry is that the value of the bird individually is low. So we think in this modality, except for a research kind of orientation, we're going to have to stick with kind of these at a distance. I know some of the other teams are using LiDAR, and I think there's thermal imaging, and there's lots of other things on the imaging side. And I noted that the support in SageMaker for video is like heaps better than it is for audio, non-speech audio, that is. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity for some of those other imaging modalities to kind of get into this action if they can become affordable enough.
Cool. One other question that we see in our chat room. It looks like the question is, what other applications in agriculture could you see the machine learning with audio streams specifically being used for?
Well, I don't know. I can answer that. Do you guys have anything you want to say? It's about audio. Everything coughs. Everything gets sick. And so there's, on-body sensing for, different species would be a natural type of thing to do. We have this legacy of 12 years in poultry. And so kind of the question is, how much does that apply to other places, other species? I think that's going to be a burgeoning and opening field. And that's actually a place where potentially you could use a lot of the other sensors to fuse and increase the accuracy of the inferences that you're making. So I actually think that's a very exciting frontier.
Awesome.
Well, I think then we really appreciate your taking these live questions. Really appreciate your joining us today and describing the Smart Broiler project. It is fascinating. I think we could probably spend hours on this, but I appreciate your time and sharing it with the broader AWS on Air platform. So thanks again, and we'll say bye to you for now as we wrap up the episode.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to the end of the episode.
Make sure to tune in on December 8th is the keynote around machine learning at 8 a.m. Pacific time. So check that out in the re-event session catalog to get the full listings.
Yeah, and next week we're going to be back right here for another episode on reInvent, the special AWS on-air edition of All in the Field, joined by a couple more phenomenal guests, including Dr. Lauren Reisberg of the Reisberg Lab at the University of British Columbia, and Mr. Jens Hittmeyer of KWS SAAT. So that's a crop inputs company that's operating in over 70 countries.
Absolutely, and really looking forward to that. Thanks again to Banks Baker of McDonald's, Dr. Tim Kurt of the Foundation for Agriculture Research, and Tom Darbonne of AudioT for sharing what they're doing in animal health research. And Matt and I are really looking forward to seeing you all next week at All in the Field on AWS On Air.
Yes, AWS Agriculture Live, special AWS On Air edition. Thanks all.